For more than 7 decades, video game creators have been exploring new ways to entertain consumers. Despite a series of difficulties the industry has encountered, it is stronger than ever, and $94 billion were exchanged in the video game industry in 2015. The journey of video game exploration began in 1940 when Edward U. Condon designed a computer for the Westinghouse display at the World's Fair. The computer played the traditional game Nim, where the players tried to avoid picking up the final matchstick. Thousands of people played it, and the computer won around 90% of the time. This lights a spark that begins a fast-growing, constantly evolving billion-dollar industry. In 1966, Ralph Baer comes up with the idea of playing a video game on a TV. On September 1st, he wrote down his ideas that start his development of TV video games. In 1968, Ralph Baer patented his idea. 4 years later, the Odyssey is released by Magnavox. The Odyssey is the first home video game system and was based on Ralph Baer's designs.
Odyssey, a new dimension for your television, now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
In 1972, Al Alcorn and Nolan Bushnell of Atari made a tennis arcade game. They tested the machine in a tavern in Sunnyvale, California. They later found out that people had played it so much that it became jammed with quarters and stopped working. This arcade legend is known today as Pong.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
In 1977, Atari releases the Atari 2600. The system's controller has a joystick, it has games in color in switchable cartridges, and the system has switches for setting difficulty levels and selecting games. The Atari 2600 makes millions of Americans gamers. In 1978, Space Invaders was released in Japan. The game was so popular it caused a small yen shortage. 1 year later, around 60,000 Space Invader arcade machines in the US let Americans spend millions and millions of quarters killing billions of aliens. In 1980, a pizza missing one slice inspires Namco's Toru Iwatani to make the arcade classic Pac-Man. 2 years later, Mrs. Pac-Man becomes a symbol of gender equality by becoming the best-selling arcade game of all time. In 1981, Donkey Kong is released by Nintendo. The game features the character Jumpman, which will later be known as Mario. In 1983, in the golden age of gaming, when making games was a surefire way to make money, the video game industry's survival was threatened when it encountered the Great Video Game Crash. The crash was caused by too many video game consoles on the market and too many terrible, quickly made third-party games with only a few good original games. Highly anticipated games like Pac-Man for the Atari 2600 turning out to be huge disappointments was another cause of the crash. But there was one game that was the final nail in the coffin, a game that nearly ended the entire video game industry. That game is known as E.T. for the Atari 2600. Atari had 5 weeks to make E.T. the video game to meet up with the release of the movie. It resulted in what is known as the worst video game of all time. Consumer confidence had reached an all-time low. Gamers were finally fed up with being sold the same thing over and over again, and the video game industry nearly died. Consoles were hurt most in the crash, but computer games were barely impacted. Bowling alleys with arcade machines saved the arcades. But the worst thing about the crash is that the industry could encounter another video game crash in the near future. In 1984, the Russian mathematician Alexei Pachinov creates Tetris, a simple yet addictive puzzle game, but the game doesn't become the classic we know today for 4 years.
Will you be the one to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System?
Hallelujah!
3 years after the video game crash, the Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the NES, revives the dying video game industry in the United States. Nintendo learns from the industry's previous mistakes, keeping a close eye on third-party games. In 1989, Nintendo popularizes handheld gaming with the Game Boy. Players love its long battery life, surprising graphics, and great gameplay. The game Tetris finally gains popularity when Nintendo bundles it with every new Game Boy.
Now you're playing with power, portable power.
In 1991, Sega searches for an iconic character for the Sega Genesis system and creates Sonic the Hedgehog. US gamers quickly buy Sega systems, loving Sonic's speed and attitude. The industry encountered challenges by parent groups and lawmakers when concern about violence in video games like Mortal Kombat caused US Senate hearings on bloodshed in video games. The controversy forced the creation of a video game rating system. In 1995, after being backstabbed in a partnership with Nintendo, Sony releases the PlayStation in the US, selling for $100 less than the Sega Saturn. PlayStation's lower price and the arrival of the Nintendo 64 in 1996 weakened Sega's home console business. When the PlayStation 2 releases in 2000, it becomes the best-selling home console of all time and forces Sega to leave the home console business.
PlayStation.
In 2001, Microsoft entered the video game business with the Xbox and hit games like Halo Combat Evolved. In 2003, Valve energizes PC gaming with the release of Steam, where gamers can download and play games online. In 2005, YouTube was released on the internet. Gamers can now play and review games online, spreading awareness of games good and bad. In 2006, Nintendo released the Wii, a console that gets gamers off the couch and moving with motion-sensitive controllers. Not only did Nintendo bring exercising to gaming, but it spawned millions of new gamers. In 2009, mobile games like Angry Birds and social games like Farmville shake up the video game industry. Millions of people who would have never expected themselves to become gamers now play away hours of games on platforms like phones and Facebook. In 2010, the indie game movement starts with the amazing popularity of Minecraft, the addictive block-building game by Swedish developer Marcus Persson. In 2011, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure becomes the first toy-to-life hit by letting players place plastic figures on the Portal of Power to teleport characters into the game. 2 years later, Disney Infinity joins the toy-to-life genre. In 2013, Papers, Please, The Last of Us, Gone Home, The Walking Dead, and other games create a new wave of mature video game stories that give players tough emotional choices in complex worlds. Today, as more women become involved in gaming, female gamers have encountered harassment in the industry. 2 high-profile women in gaming have recently encountered the ugly side of the industry. Zoe Quinn, a game developer, was accused by her ex-boyfriend of trading favors for receiving good game reviews. Those false accusations spurred a wave of death threats online. Anita Sarkeesian, who runs the video blog Feminist Frequency, which critiques games, was forced to leave her home after receiving similar threats. Exchange in the video game industry: the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. Each year, billions of dollars are exchanged in the video game market. In fact, the global gaming market will reach $91.5 billion this year, according to a report from research firm Newzoo. The bad. Online gaming has become a way for criminals to get money thanks to the rise of virtual economies in video gaming sites. Multiplayer games use in-game currencies such as World of Warcraft gold that can be exchanged for real money. The ugly. Security experts are concerned that members of ISIS or other dangerous groups may be taking advantage of video game networks to communicate undetected. Shigeru Miyamoto, the founder of Nintendo, has said, "The obvious objective of video games is to entertain people by surprising them with new experiences." Game creators will continue to explore new ways to entertain. As the exploration continues, the industry will surely encounter difficulties going forward, but there is no doubt the sales and amount of money exchanged each year will continue to grow.
Ocean Man.